All right, so what we'd like to do now is we'd like to start combining the array with loops. And you'll see that once we combine loops with arrays, we can do an awful lot of things in this class that we couldn't do before. And so I'm going to get rid of this version of the array, and we're just going to use the shortcut one so that we don't take up a lot of room on the screen. And the first thing that I want to do is I want to loop through the array and print each of the elements one per line. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to use a for loop, and I'm going to say int. Now, traditionally, I, j, and k have been the index variables used for indexing an array. The reason for that is because it's historical, has to do with a language called Fortran, where integers had to start with the letter I through Z. But in any case, that tradition has been kept up, and we're going to do the same thing. So I'm going to say it's going to start at 0, and then we're going to keep going until I reaches some number. You try and figure out with your partner when that limit should be. And then down here, we're going to do system out println, and then we're going to try and figure out what goes in there. And the output should be this on the first line, then this on the next line, this on the next line, then this, then this. Try to figure out what goes over here and what goes over here to print one item of the array per line. What is the stopping condition for our loop? When do we know we've run the loop enough times? What does it have to do with? And then next time down here, how do I make sure that I access a different element in the array each time I go through the loop? You see, if I go through here and do something like this, I'm only going to print the first element over and over again. Likewise, if I go like this, I'll only print the last element over and over again. I don't want to do that. I want to print a different element each time. Mr. Pandali, sir, what is my stopping condition? Points.length. And you can see here that if the points.length on this one is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, it's going to be 5, and the indexes go 0 to 4. And that's the reason I have a less than sign and not a less than or equal to. So it's really convenient. I use a less than sign here, and I just ask for the length of the array here. And that's going to be pretty much our standard operating procedure. There'll be some cases where we'll have to change the stopping condition to stop a little bit sooner. But for now, we'll start with this. And now my next question is, what goes in here? And this is a fundamental conceptual breakthrough that you need to do in my class. Ask yourself this question. When I go through the loop, what changes each time through the loop? Ms. Saludkar, what should I replace these question marks with? Okay, it's nice and simple, I. And now if I run this, you can see it prints one element per. What I'd like you to do now is I would like you to modify this loop so that at the end of it, it prints the average of all the numbers. You may need to add some more variables. Go ahead and do that now. Change the code so that it calculates the average of all the numbers. You're going to need a container variable that's going to hold the sum. So be sure to create one. We want to calculate the average. So create a sum variable. What should the data type on that sum variable be? Integer, decimal, Boolean? What do you think? Then in the loop, try to add up so that you keep a running total in the sum of what you've added so far. And then when you get outside the loop, you're going to need to do some division in order to get the final average calculation. And then you're going to print whatever your answer is. Remember, I is an index. Point sub I is an item in the array. I just goes 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. That's what I goes. Points sub I goes 12.3, 17.4, 56.2. Initially, you're going to be confused between I and points sub I. We need to straighten that out. Ms. Banerjee, have you made any progress trying to calculate the average? Okay, can you tell me what is the name of the variable you used for summing? Double sum. I like it, miss. And when you initialized it, what did you initialize it to? That's a good idea. And now, what should we do inside the loop here, miss? That's a good way to add them all together. And then when you were all done, what did you do at the end? And you can see it's here. Now, if I was to do this by hand, I would get a different answer. What answer do you think I would get if I was going to do it by hand? 51.38. It turns out that there's a slight error here because of rounding. You've probably used your TI-84 calculator in your science classes and come up with answers that look like this also. Remember that when you work with decimal numbers in Java or in any computing language, certain decimal numbers can't be represented exactly because the limited number of bits. So this is a slight round off error. So I want to go back to one thing here. If I had written it like this, would I still get the same answer? Let's try it. You can see I get the exact same answer. And what I want to know is my way better or is Miss Banerjee's way better? Please discuss. Mr. Garofalo, sir, do you like the 5 here that I wrote, or do you like Miss Banerjee's long-winded? Okay, this is much better because it'll work no matter how big the array is. This is the abstract way of doing it. Hard coding the 5, that only works for only a small subset of problems. You try to write code that's flexible and abstract. So you want to ask the array, how big are you every single time you need to know. So now I'm going to just change this code slightly. I'm going to take it out of the main method and put it in its own method. So I'm going to go public. We'll have it return an answer to us. We'll have it public double get average. And this thing will take an array, which is a double array. So we'll go double array data like that. And then we're going to, oh, sorry, we'll call it points. And then we're going to move this code into here. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to just return that. And I'm going to call the method right here. I'm going to call it, oh, I need to put a static here so that I don't have to create an object of type demo. And now over here, I'll put get average points like that. I'll give this a different name so that you don't get confused here. Okay, I'll just give it a different name in here. Okay, so inside the main method, the array is called points. Inside this method that calculates the average, it's got a different name. That's perfectly okay. Let's run it. And you can see it still works. The reason that I pushed it out into its own separate method is we're going to write a few more now, and I want you to write a separate method for each one. This next one is a little bit harder. It's called maximum, and we'll call it public static double get max, and we'll say double data again. Now, I realize that asking you to write this code is going to be fairly challenging right now. All I want you to do is talk to your partner and come up with an algorithm for searching the array and finding out which one is the largest one. See if you can talk it out with your partner. So first, I want you to create a variable called max and set it equal to the first element in the array. Then I want you to go through the loop, and each time you find an element that's bigger than max, replace max with that variable. And then finally, after you're done with the loop, return whatever you have in the max variable. That's your algorithm. Please do that now. One of the nice things about arrays is you know how big they are, so you know how many times the loops will run, so it'll almost always be a for loop. Ms. Caitlin, what's the first thing I do? Okay, so I set assume first element is maximum to get started. We just got to have something in there, okay? Now we're going to have our for loop. Go ahead, Miss. Okay. Now, I'm just going to take a break for just 1 second here. What Miss Caitlin has done here is perfectly good, perfectly good. I'm just going to rearrange it just slightly for your brain to make it a little bit easier, okay? Okay, I'm going to write it like this. Okay, and then what do I want to do here at the end here, Miss Caitlin? Okay, so let's try that out. Okay, and you can see that it's giving me this is the largest element. You see that, right? Okay, now I want to try one more thing. Now, Miss Caitlin has said it this way. Do you think that it would also work if I did this? Would that also work? Please discuss with your partner. Mr. Degush, sir, what do you think about my simplification? Do you like it? Okay, it'll work here. Let me show you. See, it still works here, but there'll be cases where it doesn't work. Try to discuss with your partner, when won't it work? Let me show you an example of when it won't work. What's supposed to be the largest number here? What's the largest number here, mathematically speaking? Negative 2.4 should be the answer, right? Let's see what happens when I run it now. Look what comes back as the answer. You see that? The reason this happened is that you were lazy, and instead of using the actual data that was provided to you, you decided to make up data, which was 0.0. That's not even in the array. So do not make up data when you have actual data available. That little trap that I showed you where 0.0 isn't going to work, that's one of the more popular traps on the AP FRQs. You don't want to fall into that trap. You want to use one of the array elements to initialize. Now, if I run it, you'll see it works perfectly well. What I want you to do now, in the time allotted, I'm going to just change this slightly. I'm going to make this a void return type, and I'm going to just print the element instead of returning it. So let's do this. And what I'd like to do now is, this will be the last thing we do today. First, let me just run this to make sure I haven't broken anything. Okay, it still works. What I'd like you to do now is change this method so that it prints max and min. Print. Now here's the trick. Here's the trick. You can only use one loop. Only use one loop, print both the max and the min. Please do that now as our going away exercise.